My name's Ivan. I'm a connections planner at Coca-Cola, and I want to spend the next, it was only 10 minutes, but now it's 4, talking about what that means and how we approach connections at the Coca-Cola company. My job, and I think the job of all connections planners around the world, is in essence a reflection of what I'm about to do here on stage. I spend my time sandwiched between these two wonderful talents, trying to crystallise the brilliant thinking of Jonathan and the agency teams, and translate it into genius ways of getting stories to come to life in the real world across a whole host of connections. Now, if you're going to do that, you need outstanding creativity at the front end, which today, as you've seen, is represented by Jonathan, and brilliant execution at the back end, represented by Pierre. Obviously, I represent today the intelligent and liberal use of lubrication between the two of them to smoothly get us from one point to the other. Now, as Jonathan said, this job has become more complicated but also more exciting in recent times. The distribution of creativity, the omnipotence of technology, the behaviours of certain sorts of people mean that it's no longer enough for us to simply erect our stories and leave them against a static backdrop of a communications landscape. Because these days we have to plant our ideas in a more chaotic and organic connections ecosystem. So what I want to do is just expand briefly upon the brilliant exposition of Liquid and Link that Jonathan talked about, and lead us towards a fantastic example of turning that theory into powerful, effective action with a case history that Pio is going to show. So, from a static communications landscape to a more chaotic ecosystem. Now, you know this as well as we do. It's more complicated out there, but it's also opening up previously unimagined opportunities to do great things. We've still got the big, powerful beasts like TV, Hollywood, global events like the World Cup and music celebrities. Thank heavens they're here, and they're being supplemented by new leviathans like Facebook or QQ. At the same time, smaller, more nimble, more focused devices are growing up, like mobile apps, social gaming, location technologies, or bedroom celebrities, and it's the way that we can get the big and the small to work together that's changing the paradigm of the way that we think about connections. Now, when we get them working together, our challenge is to exploit the whole of that ecosystem to build a system of connections that allow our stories, as Jonathan showed you, to scale and spread and grow. Now, you all know that, so I guess the question you want to know is, how's Coca-Cola going to do it? Well, at the heart of our model is the idea that we're going to change our connection thinking around 4 dimensions. The first is that we have to start getting beyond the way we manufacture communications. As Jonathan said, for 60 years, with the help of many of you in this room and many others outside of CAN, we've been preeminent in the field of creating and distributing brilliant commercial communication. But as this ecosystem evolves, we need an evolving way of doing this. So we need to move beyond manufacturing communications, building campaigns and placing messages, and start to get into the world where we plant ideas, nurture communications, and cultivate conversations. So in essence, we have to go from the world of Bob the Builder to the world of Dirt Girl, the latest cartoon hit for kids from Australia. And word of warning, if you're searching on Google for an image of Dirt Girl, make sure you've got safe mode turned on before you start typing. Otherwise you'll learn something new, which is not a good thing. So this is the first dimension around which we're shifting. We're still going to want to get excellence in the old world of Bob the Builder, manufacturing brilliant communications, but we need to lean into this future world and pursue brilliance in the organic, connected ecosystem of Dirt Girl. That's the first dimension where we're shifting. The second is the way we're going to do it. At the heart of our model is still the consumer, who's continually connected and impersonally immersed in a continuum of connections. And it's through these connections, owned, earned, shared and paid media, that we're going to get our stories to grow. Now, our stories are no longer just about what it is that we choose to say, but also about the experience of those who are listening. So we're going to express our brand through the content that we create, the liquid content we create, and then invite interaction through the experiences that we curate. Secondly, the storytelling doesn't end there, but it spreads and it grows as the people who've listened tell it again in their own voices and put their own spin on it. We're calling this social content, and the conversations that that fosters and engenders are the lifeblood of the Liquid and Link strategy. Now, this is nothing new. People have always talked. It's just the power and speed with which they can scale and spread those stories are 3 degrees of magnitude greater than they've ever been before. Now, when this all works together, we get our stories to flow and grow, and this kind of starts turning like a great storytelling turbine that creates enormous tailwinds for our brands. And if we're going to make that happen, we need to think about the way we construct that turbine by describing the ecosystem within which we're going to plant our ideas. As Jonathan said, this is going to call for a much greater symbiosis of those that create the stories with those that engineer the connections through which they're going to grow. And we can't control what happens when an idea lands, but we can intelligently design it so it's fit for the environment to thrive in the places that we need it to grow. I used to call this propagation planning, and I think its time has come. Thinking about the way that stories scale and spread is going to become more and more important for us. Now, the way we're going to do that at Coca-Cola is to think and rethink the way connections work for us. You may recall some years ago, we talked about Coca-Cola and its system of bottlers as being one of the biggest media owners on the planet. Every day, 1.7 billion of our drinks are served around the planet in more than 200 countries. We have 10 million coolers and refrigerators out there, supported by 3 million vending machines. We have relationships with over 20 million customers who sell our products every day. If you put our distribution fleet together, it's bigger than FedEx and UPS combined. And if you added up all the people who work with us, we'd be the 4th largest employer on the planet. So by any stretch of the imagination, we do have an enormous network of owned connections. And I guess the thing that's fascinating us right now is when you overlay consumers' own technology on top of that network of connections, we can genuinely bring it to life and mobilise it as a force. And we're going to have to do that. Because if you can do that and make astounding things happen, it's almost incumbent upon us to do so, because not only does everything communicate, but so does everyone. If you believe the statistic that says word of mouth is 11 times more powerful at changing people's behaviour than TV advertising, you can see why we're so dead set on creating experiences and ideas that will get spread and will share. So this is changing the way we think about connections planning, making sure it's more social at its heart. And that's the second dimension, thinking about how those stories spread through owned, earned, shared and paid media with social at the heart. The third dimension, if we're going to do this properly, is to start to set targets and measures that go beyond just whom we hit into what happens when people become engaged. We need to recalibrate the entire communications value chain to take account of not only the first impression, but learn to fuel and facilitate and favour the second expression as our stories are retold through social engagement. Now, we're working on the way that we're going to do this, and we're ready to talk about this soon. Of course, this isn't new. This is just an evolution of the underlying principles of media planning that I was taught 25 years ago when it was still cool to wear a tie. My mentor then told me that media planning was, in her words, just like sex. You knew what you wanted to do, you just had to work out who you were going to do it to, when, where and how you were going to do it so it was going to be memorable, and if you were like her, how much it was going to cost you. In essence, that boiled down to very much thinking about getting the right message at the right time in the right place to the right person, and that's still true today. We still have to do that, but do it on steroids. Right used to be a rough concept, now it's a precise reality. Right used to mean getting it approximately appropriate, but now it's all about getting it precisely hyper-relevant through space and time because of the mobile phone. We're starting to think about the mobile phone at Coca-Cola as being like people's sixth sense, a sense through which they experience the world around them, but see it through a new layer of reality, a layer in which we can make astounding things happen. So that's the fourth dimension of change, making sure our content that is liquid and linked is right here and right now. The third, moving beyond first impressions to get to the next expression. The second, stories that scale through owned, earned, shared and paid communications. And the first, moving beyond manufacturing communications to cultivating conversations. So that's the theory of connections, but it counts for nothing if it doesn't lead to something. And of course all of this is designed to turn those conversations into transactions. We're starting to see that as we apply these principles of connections to the way that we create, produce, distribute and curate and cultivate conversations, that great results are happening. I think Goethe put it best when he said, knowing is not good enough, to apply is more important. Willing is not good enough, to do is more important. Mae West said something similar, but it wasn't repeatable on stage. I can't think of anybody better to bring to life and fulfil the imperative of the 19th century German polymath than the Senior Vice President of Content Excellence from Coca-Cola North America, Mr. P.O. Schunke. P.O. is going to show you what happens when you take the creative intelligence applied to the way we make content and match it with the genius of execution in making things happen, to get great stories to grow, to get those stories to scale and spread in a liquid and linked way through owned, earned, shared and paid connections, and generate a whole new way for us of talking and engaging to teams. Pio.